All right, so I'm not awake or functional yet. Let me go find all the things. All right, I guess the first question is, did anybody have any questions in the document? As I scroll to the bottom. Yes, Andy, you have the first question.
Yeah, so I guess it was already answered in some of the text here, but my primary question was, are the reports uploaded, or do they just like stop, do the job stop parsing after they find one vulnerability if it's allowed to fail? And I assumed it wouldn't, but I just wanted to be safe and clear on that. So, so all the reports will complete and upload. But then my next question is, not next question, but in there is, will it, what's the wording we'll use at the bottom of the job when it finds a vulnerability? Is it going to be error job failed exit code 6 or?
I don't think we actually have control over that. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, and there's a whole different bug that we can get to once we get through these questions.
Yeah.
But I think when you pass an error code, like it can't do anything extra, like it has to use the default text.
Is that the default text?
I can have a look, but I think that default text is job exited with exit code 6, let's say. Hang on.
Yeah, we can't like add anything
and it's
additional.
Red. Yeah, and we can't change the color. Oh yeah, so it's error, job failed, exit code, let's say 6. So it's going to show up as an error, and that's not something we can change.
So how do people? Oh, go ahead, Olivier.
I'm just assuming this is similar to what we have for test jobs. Like if you have a unit test that fails, you might be experiencing the exact same behavior.
Even if it's a negative test case scenario, yes.
But in some of those test cases, wouldn't, like, I got yelled at by DangerBot, and what it did was it threw a comment in the MR, so I was able to like know why I broke some rule, right? So I guess my real concern around this is what's the guidance we're providing to users with this error, exit code 6? Like, I go into the job, it failed. Why did it fail? How do I make it not fail, right? Because that's how I believe all our programs were programmed to work with jobs. They're these binary, like they pass and they fail. They fail, why, or in what stage did it deploy so I can test it? Did it, et cetera, et cetera.
So I'm pretty sure, I don't know about DangerBot because that's a linter, so I think it's slightly different. But usually when I'm looking at the logs, if the logs are on, there's usually a line above my errors that kind of hints at me why it's angry. I'm not sure if we have the ability to output something there.
Yeah, so in that case, it would be vulnerabilities detected, just a message. And then we would have error, job failed, exit code 6. And that part we can't change. So users might or might not have a look at the line just right before.
Yeah.
Because the red catches the eye. So.
Yeah. Okay, if we have some ability to put messaging in the job, that would be ideal. And
I mean, we can ask people, but whenever I personally fail a job, let me share my screen because hopefully my screen is explanatory here. So like when I fail a job, I usually go to here and it like tells me the last couple things it had to say before it got to my error. And so I usually look, and if I'd say like the 2 or 3 lines above my error code tell me what it's angry about. And in this case, it's angry about a blog post that I didn't write, in which case I stopped caring.
Yeah.
Because it's not my blog post. So I'm assuming if we could say like, you know, findings detected or something like, and have that documented in our documentation, people would then be able to A, easily look it up, and B, be like, findings, oh, they mean like the things that are going to show up in my MR. So that's kind of where, like, I'm assuming this is some kind of message we can control, but it's this one we have 0 control over.
Okay.
Yes,
that's
totally.
fine.
And that's exactly what I do. And I tend to ignore the last line because, again, that is an exit code. Now have a look at what's right before that. And maybe that's, we can use these 2 lines in the troubleshooting section on the docs, because users would look for that, these exact 2 lines, and we would explain how you can tweak the job, change the allowed exit codes, whatever.
Yeah. Will all of these, even if it's allowed to fail, I guess it still fails, everything will show up in that failed jobs tab? And then when this launches, will every secure job now have exit code 6?
There's kind of a blocker on that right now, but if we get what we want.
Yeah.
So, and then here's kind of the key thing. If we get what we want, as of right now, so backing up, today, everyone has allow failure by default if they use a default template. So it doesn't matter why my job fails today, my pipeline's allowed to continue. We're leaving that alone. However, our strong recommendation is if you are a very concerned group of people writing code, you can change the all to only 6, which means any technical failures will stop you. And then you have to fix your configuration, but it will be allowed to kind of continue on with its life if it finds findings. So they don't have that granularity today, but that's where we recommend if there are I need to find a nicer word for paranoid, because it's not
zero trust.
Yes, if they're very cautious, they can certainly do that. Our number one recommendation, like our recommendation for all persons, is to use MR approvals. Because in my opinion, although not perfect, that today is a better indicator, because MR approvals is a little smarter about what's new and what's not. And that's like the major catch with this. This is not smart about what's new versus not new. And so like our recommendation, and my goal is to put this on the, apparently there's going to be a new configurations section or page that Russell's working on, but over in application security, my goal is to just explain how things work by default. And then on the configurations area, Russell and I are going to work on saying, like, here is your options. Our first highly recommended option is to use an MR approval. If that's not, you know, careful and cautious enough for your programming environment, we recommend switching the allow all over to the allow 6. And if that's still not good enough for you, you could just remove that line completely, but we don't recommend that because that just sounds like a terrible idea. So.
Why is that, by the way, Nicole?
The number.
To me, that's reasonable, and to rephrase it.
So the number of info and warnings that show up. So if I fail on all findings and I run SAST and dependency scanning and so on and so forth, there's a very high number of info and warnings and low, which at many organizations I've worked at prior, not to disparage them in any way because I think it was the right choice, we did not care about those and we allowed them to go to production. And I think a lot of people do that, and we would be halting them on that if they were to stop on any exit code at all, because exit code 6 includes info and warnings.
Yeah, and that's because we don't. That's because the scanning jobs report findings, and some of them might have been dismissed in the UI. And scanning jobs are stateless, not connected to the database, don't know what's been dismissed. So you're kind of stuck if you've got dismissed penalties.
Yeah, and
So,
this is where
thanks for
Sam White
reminder.
comes in. So Sam White's supposed to tweak, not right now, but he's supposed to tweak security orchestration so people do get a little more of a granular control and finesse over things in the future. That it's not quite the cudgel that MR approvals are.
Well, he's got that now too. That's also just to improve. So Nicole, Fabian, that was a key concern that I had in one of the issues. I don't think anyone's had a chance to respond to it yet. So I'm going to be opportunistic and jump to my question last on the list. Dismissing a finding is extremely common for whatever reason. In especially a large project, the default branch is likely to have at least one. Does that mean the second I do that, forever, any new feature branch will always fail with exit code 6? To me,
Yes.
Unless you fix it.
That is a huge problem. I mean, we are changing a model where you're allowed to sort of observe what happens and allow it to continue forward, to one where unless you have a pristine code base, which, come on, let's be realistic, that's never going to happen, you will now always see failures. And I think that that's going to cause the same kind of information blindness that we're seeing today, unless there's some sort of way to tie things that have been dismissed to those new feature branches.
And that's a post process, so we can't do that.
Yeah, to me, I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting, but I feel like that's the biggest unexplored area, because to me, this doesn't feel like much of a two-way door unless we just rip it out and turn it off. I mean, talk about a cudgel. There's no granularity in there at all by status, by severity. It's just, to put it a different way, I think anybody that has an existing project that turns this on is immediately going to see all of their jobs fail all of the time for all branches. Well, which means that you can't use block on failure.
It's not exactly true. If you got, if the scanning jobs have vulnerability features based on severity, for instance, or based on a deny list, like we have in container scanning, then what's being filtered out is not detected, and so that might help.
But most
people will dismiss something.
Most people
and you would have to be a manual process of correlating. I dismissed a thing, now I have to go in and put that on the deny list on the...
And that we don't want. That we don't want, because we want users to use a UI which is more powerful.
Well,
yeah,
caveat on that one, I do actually want to, it's in the like 6-month list bucket at this point, but I do actually want to introduce the concept of ignore into dependency scanning, where we allow them to populate, kind of like container scanning does. We allow them to set certain CVEs or whatever that it just ignores going forward, or certain dependencies and versions just ignore going forward, because there are customers who just know we've accepted this risk. I don't care.
Would that be a configuration file checked in the repo?
As of right now, I think it'll have to be unless we can get approval to get our own database, which I find highly unlikely.
We turn that ignore into a auto dismiss. I mean, I guess it really doesn't, never mind, it doesn't solve this problem because it's post. Yeah.
So, I mean, Matt, to your point, like we could absolutely say like that is a blocker and we shouldn't go forward. But then I think we actually have to go the other direction. And I have never been able to get buy-in the other direction. And the other direction is we always give a 0 unless they're like consistently across all the scanners. And I believe at this point there's 1, if not 2 scanners who don't follow that.
Just one, it's fuzzing.
It's fuzzing, yeah. And I was not, and so right now today I'm gonna back up even further. When I first started, the most common question I get is, it passed, but there were findings I don't understand. And that's a question I would get from everyone on their first couple of runs. And so to solve that problem, I think we could possibly do something in the UI. Or when you're installing or on the, like we could do multiple places. So the number one question I always got was, what do you mean you found stuff I passed? The second most common question I'm getting today is account managers going, but like sometimes it means it found stuff and sometimes it means it doesn't, because I guess some people are running fuzzing when they ask me. And so I just want consistency. So if we want to go the other way, then we have to be like, okay, the rule is you find findings, you're always a 0. We have to, talk to fuzzing about switching over their stuff, and make either direction we go. I think we need to be consistent and we need to clearly document it in the docs because we get asked about it frequently enough that I feel there's a documentation failure and there's a UI failure.
I mean, is there just like a general misunderstanding of how these jobs are supposed to be indicated? Like what is, like for instance, does code quality fail, right? Whenever there's like a 6% bump or something, like something minute. Like are we following their patterns?
We can double check, but I don't believe that it is based on the videos I've seen. We can boop their PMs directly. I believe it passes. But the interesting thing I see sometimes is when it comes to security and compliance, the people asking the questions are coming at it from a different brain space or thought space.
Do they care about the ability to make the pipeline fail when there are vulnerabilities detected?
They care about it in the granular level, not in the level we're offering today. I was trying to solve the understanding problem. We have to wait for Sam White to get to the more granular issue because a lot of people, the things that I hear specifically, there's been 2 or 3 customers lately is, I only care about certain types of things and I don't care about things that I've dismissed. So I know that we in dependency scanning at least have to add in pre-ignore dismissal lists because that's overwhelming people right now and making them cranky. And I think the auto dismiss will help to a degree, but in some cases, these customers know across my organization, I never care about this version because we have a workaround. So don't even ever bother me with it. It aggravates me. And then secondarily, we as an organization only care about critical and high. Don't bother me about anything else. We'll get to it when we get to it, but we have so many of those, I can't get to those others.
So,
but from a technical point of view, it makes sense to improve the dismissal feature so that you can dismiss based on stability, based on whatever, many criteria. And then
and I see that kind of as a separate, more of a quality of results problem than a understanding what just happened to me problem. Although maybe they're the same, and you can pipe in there.
But just to finish this idea, that if we improve this this feature of the ability to dismiss vulnerabilities, then we can focus on communicating what's been dismissed from the database to the scanners, but there's work involved. It's doable. It's like passing an artifact. Maybe it wouldn't have to be in the repo. It can be something, a file, some kind of artifact that the backend would transmit to would pass on to the scanning jobs.
But are jobs allowed to create 2 artifacts? I thought they're only allowed to create 1.
They can create as much as they need. But yeah, Fabian, you're pointing into I think it's the right direction, because even if you're not talking only about dismissal, but also one thing that I've seen coming into this discussion is I want to block my pipeline if there is a new vulnerability. That knowledge about what is new from what is past is not capable. We are not capable of defining this in the scan job because it's stateless. This information comes from the database. So I think we really need this post-analyzer process that we grab information from the database, and during the pipeline execution checks what's new, what's old, what's dismissed. And this is what will be providing us the ability to have a smart orchestration in the pipeline and decide whether or not we want to block based on the rules. So based on the feedback from Matt, maybe we need this first additional step about, okay, I need to inject this post-analyzer logic that grab information from the database into the scan. Maybe just one scan would be enough. And tell, is this a dismissed or is this a new one? And then adjust the exit code based on that. But there is
possibly, but there's people do care about both those. Some customers care, are there any highs that we haven't dismissed? Other customers care about, are there any new highs? So there is, I mean, we could do some, polls to ask people, but there are, I believe, people who would want those 2 different things, which are very different.
I don't know if I fully agree about that first case, because anyone that cares about a high that's not dismissed, that's not a question of new feature branches. It's already by definition in the default branch. So it's in a location where it's already causing problems, right? So you're now blocking any net new feature development upstream from that. I mean, if you want to do that, I feel like you're addressing it in the wrong place. And so that's more of a Fabian, sorry.
I want to object here. Maybe there's a misunderstanding from me, but in the case of dependent scanning, and to a lesser extent in the case of SAS and other scanners, we might be in a situation where we check the same code base again and again, and because we have new vulnerabilities, new advisories in the security database, we get new stuff, possibly highly critical vulnerabilities. And it's also possible in the case of SAS because we might improve the scanners, get new rules, and the ability to detect new things. So I suspect
I'm going to point out that's exactly it. Matt, you're thinking about them as like I existed yesterday. And so like yesterday, maybe I was time clock version 1, and I had some highs that I had, and we moved on with my life at that point. But now today, time clock version 1 has a critical that somebody found. And so maybe I'm thinking about it slightly wrong, and maybe we could parse it slightly differently, but I became critical. So I'm the same finding, but I'm worse now. And so I'm not a new finding.
You still either existed in the default branch already, and it's just that the updated information was first applied to an outstanding feature branch that had come from the default. In fact, I've heard this complaint from customers. I'm a developer, I just opened a new branch, I've committed a README file, and you've stopped me dead because I had a critical vulnerability. What? I didn't introduce one. Well, it's because the analyzers had updated the information, but there was a stale default branch. So again, I think this is more of a tool use problem than an actual, I don't know, I'm worried that we're
in
solving in the right direction, but not with all the pieces people are going to need.
Yeah, in this one case, I think we might need to maybe separate them out if at all possible, to a user being like, you didn't introduce these, but this changed. This was newly found, and your security department says no. You know, like they've dismissed other stuff on this, but this is a new one, and it's a new thing against an old dependency. So maybe we need to have a different way to visually show that, so that a user could potentially get a different type of approval. But from a security person perspective, if some 0-day just dropped, they want to know that it's there, and they sometimes do want to stop everything so that that can get fixed and upgraded, and to heck with all the new features. If that makes sense.
No, it totally does. I guess my concern is that there are so many different potential use cases and setups that organizations have. If we move them into a mode where there are these new sort of failures and there isn't any nuance or granularity like we're talking about here, exactly what Olivier had said, if we can't do any sort of post-processing, I think that's where my concern comes from, is that we're just sort of shifting it from something that people don't like to something different people may end up not liking because it still doesn't quite do what they need to. I should say, I don't disagree that the exit codes and having more specificity is the proper way to go. I'm just worried that if we just turn that on now, we're going to end up in a similar situation where developers are just trying to put in code and they're going to start seeing things that are all these pipeline failures, and there's going to be frustration that's like, but I didn't do anything. No, it wasn't mine.
The pipeline won't fail. The job itself,
sorry, the
job
jobs
status,
are going to fail.
So this is a wrong UI signal, I agree, but this is not in their way. This is not preventing their workflow. It will just send a bad signal like, okay, why is this job not failing? If people really do care about it. But yeah, I agree with you.
So,
But wouldn't
okay.
people have policies in place that say security jobs have to succeed in certain branches? So
No.
I worry. What I worry about is seeing this new array of allowed to fail, a bunch of warning icons, and then users going to be like, well, why did that fail? And clicking on every single secure job and saying, oh, there's a vulnerability, oh, there's a vulnerability, oh, this one, there's an actual problem I need to fix, and then, oh, there's a vulnerability, oh, there's a vulnerability. So it's abstracting the pass fail mechanism of the intent that was already designed.
Yeah, but Andy, if we have a post analyzer job that makes the diff between what's new and what's already dismissed in the database, and if the job lists the vulnerabilities with new ones and exits with exit code 6, for instance, and that information is repeated somehow in the vulnerability report page, then it should make sense to users. What do you think?
But they're in a different workflow. So they're not going to be jumping back between the vulnerability report. They're on the pipeline page or in the MR. So they're going to have to.
There's no merge request for me right now. Just how.
But they're looking at a pipeline, right?
They're looking at the pipeline,
yeah.
And I focus on the default branch because this is where vulnerability is stored in the database come from. And let's suppose that they have scheduled pipelines running every day, and one day it fails because they have new vulnerabilities, and these are spotted in a post analyzer job suggested by Olivier, where vulnerabilities detected by the scanning job are compared to the one the backend knows about, and making the diff again. So there would be a diff. It would show up as a list in the job for people who care about the jobs, because some people don't, but some people users are interested in the pipeline and what happens in that pipeline space. They would see this failing job, open it, see the log, and see the list of new findings. Exit code 6. That would make sense to them, I guess. It would make sense to me, but
they would have
I'm biased.
They have to investigate every failed job, though. That was my concern. Is
Yeah.
like you're gonna have to click. Yeah, I have to run too. Maybe we can sync on this again. I think the singular post analyzer job taking the brunt of this as the one that fails might be a thought.
I think the one
instead of all
catch,
secure jobs,
and you
but-
can drop, this is still recorded, and
Okay,
you can catch the
whatever.
end. Plus there's issues. But I think kind of to Matt's point, until we have a post analyzer, this may put people in the same spot they're in today, which is confused, but more confused than they already are, because they're confused today. And this might put them, I think, more confused. So what might make more sense for MVC is actually to get fuzzer to switch over to 0, and then spend between 14 and 15 working on defining a shared post analyzer logic between the teams that says, okay, in 14 we all solidified on 0, but on 15 we're all going to solidify on 6 with a post processor, and the post processor has these 3 rules that everyone has to follow, where we take out anything that was previously found. So not like I specifically do not want to include a new vulnerability against a previously found dependency. Like, so in our logic, I would want to make sure that that still counts as new. And so we'd really have to get down into the nitty gritty of what do we consider new today versus not. And so in my case, you know, define that of like, this is new, this is not new. And once we all sort that out, say, okay, the post processor is only gonna yell about new things, and then the existing things will go into, like you said, a separate artifact or some other technological workaround where we've got the data, but we're not yelling about it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I think just to, I don't want to belabor the point, but from a developer perspective, I'll probably go check the pipeline if it failed and I can't get my MR through. And if I've introduced a clean branch, my code doesn't have any new vulnerabilities, and the MR security widget shows me like, you know, nothing's here, good to go. But then I look over at the pipeline and I see individual security jobs that have failed. I'm going to be like, well, but I don't see anything in my code. And I don't disagree that you can go into the pipeline job and see what the failure is for exit code 6. But in the case of something, you know, currently fairly noisy like a DAST or a SAST scan, there could be hundreds or thousands of dismissed findings. Once I do that a couple of times, that job is dead to me. I never look at it again. And that's what I'm worried about, is that we're introducing something intended to be helpful, that if it doesn't go far enough, people are going to become information blind and they will never go back to it. And I know Nicole and I have been fighting with stuff like this in the UI, at least I have since we started, where it's like, no, it's better now. Please go look at it again, because it was not good a year and a half ago when we fixed it.
Yeah, and I can see that. And the thing is, like, I 100% still want to do this, but this that I am trying to do, the problem statement I'm trying to solve is, I want the analyzers to be consistent so I can update the documentation to better set expectations. And based on the valid concerns of, we really shouldn't release this MVC until we get a post processor of some sort and agree on how we do that, which is going to take more than a couple of releases. So I think we're looking further down the road, but we could like start working on stuff, maybe put it behind a flag and let people opt in, because I just don't want to like accidentally break people's shit. But like, maybe we introduce behind a flag and get feedback, and that would be great. So I still absolutely want to do that, and I'm going to have a conversation obviously with Sam Kerr then, and be like, I need fuzzing to agree to get on board with this. Otherwise I'm going to have to write the documentation to say it applies to everyone except for fuzzing, which would feel shitty. But I can do that if I have to. And
Nicole too, in this, if we do go, I mean, like, I really like the idea of a post-processing because it does solve a number of problems. I'm wondering if we could leverage what we've already got on the vulnerability management side, because we're having to do that diff compare to populate the MR we might be able to pull a lot of that logic into the analyzer, but it seems like that having that would be a really good place to do some of these things, like these custom pass or exclusion rules. And it's a single point to maybe
I don't
toss
know
some of that in
well
there.
enough how it's working today to say yes or no at this point.
Oh no, this is magic unicorns. This is future state stuff, right? But by having a single post-processing job that any of the security jobs would feed into and it would feed back to, in theory, even a third party could potentially just almost get that for free, right? If that's the single place where we're saying, oh, this is where I've put all of my exception rules. Like I don't care about CWE 1, 2, 3 because whatever, my organization has controls or whatever. Right. So it's like this generic thing where all the security jobs feed into and then pull back. It could be really valuable, I think is what I'm saying. But yeah,
If we can get there, if we can get there easily, I agree. The if is, however, a large if. But okay, so I will attempt to document out the summary of this, which is we still want to do this. In 15.0, once we get post-processing released early under a feature flag for those who want to play with it early, the revised way to get to the stated goal, which is consistency between the scanners, is we want to get fuzzing to buy in to going to 0. And Nicole still needs to update the documentation in the 3 or 4 places that were discussed. I just need to completely change the verbiage of it, because the entire goal of this thing was still to have consistency and clear documentation, which is absolutely what I still want. And it's just the post MVC is now aimed for 15.0 with an early release under a feature flag once we can get some post processing, which we will discuss in a separate issue of, for each scanner, logically, what to them counts as something worthy of being new. And so like in my case, I can detail out like the dependency isn't new, but the finding related to the dependency is newly introduced into the vulnerability database. This counts as a new to me type thing.
And
yay, chaos!
And interestingly, we're not even talking about what's been dismissed. Maybe it's not been dismissed, but it was already there. So we don't care when doing
that's not new to me.
As you said, it's very, Matt, it's very similar to what we do in the merge request. And that's inspiring. Maybe we can reuse code and simplify things. Yeah, I'm just worried about possibly the ability to remove the post analyzer job to get rid of the approval step. But that's inspiring.
That's a future fix, right? I know Melissa's going to fix all of our rights and permissions, and so maybe that becomes some new special permission that the post analyzer is automatically inserted into a pipeline with any security job, and only special people can turn off. Hand wave. But it does open, I think, the post analyzer. The more that we kind of talk about this, the more I think that sounds like a really promising idea, because you're right, you could insert very special processing rules that are specific to your organization without having to do, I guess, all the configuration or all the nuances of the scanners. And so there could be easy on-off rules. Like, Nicole, to your point, if people don't want to allow things that are just newly detected in a branch that may also exist in, the target branch. And the other problem is we can only do something to default today. But I know a lot of organizations are going to care about things like going into a maintenance branch or whatever. And so that post analyzer can easily sit in between and not have to be it's only the default gatekeeper.
That's a item I have that I've been meaning to get to for the past 3 months and haven't gotten there, but I want to define what I want from the dependency list page and sort of from the vulnerability list page, but obviously I'll have to run that by you. And one of it is the ability to pick my branch, in that I could say, okay, by default, we only care about your default branch. However, one could in some way configure to add an additional branch, like you're saying, whether this is a upcoming release branch or this is a security branch or whatever it is. Like, you could choose to add, I would like to add an additional branch, and then we'd have to record, are you default branch or are you security branch or whatever. so that I could filter my, I would start with default and then there'd be a little asterisk next to it, like there's another branch, you can pick one, and, you know, and switch between them or pick both or whatever, UX TBD. But I feel like people are going to want more than default branch eventually. But
yeah,
you
if it helps, Nicole, I've already got the requests, the issues, and designs for that.
Then definitely, I'll just be like, and use those designs.
It is pretty straightforward, but absolutely, people have requested that on the vulnerability management side because they want to do things like I have 2 previous maintenance branches that I have to maintain, or I do have the security branch. And in some cases, they're using tags, and I want to track a tag, not an actual, you know, I don't want to look at the branch, so to speak, because that's the way that they choose to do their CD. So yes, I will share those.
And that's definitely, yeah, that's definitely a thing I want to get to. But for right now, I figure whatever I do for this would then apply therein. All right, this means I have to spend my whole day rewriting epics. Yay!
And also for the background story, when we wanted to have this feature for all branches and certainly for stable branches, the main objection was storage, database storage. But that does, I would say that doesn't count.
Would you be willing to reply if I made a comment? Would you be willing to reply? We originally did not do this because of concerns about storage in the DB.
Certainly, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for context,
yeah, because I mean, I remember this discussion, and we had similar use cases where we were interested in stable branches. Like we've got version 1, but there's version 2 coming, and we want to track vulnerabilities in this branch too. But we were told, nope, storage, that's going to be too much. It's going to be too much data. And at least to be on the same safe side, sorry, we should start with the default branch, and then we'll see. But kind of got. But
yeah, for context, the database, because it's having issues right now, I can't press this yet. But I have a thing scheduled with a Noop to discuss the features we cannot have today because of concerns about database performance and size.
Yeah, because it's storage and performance, it's correlated. Yeah.
Yes. And so I'm making that issue to beg for us to find whatever the solution is. I'm making that issue in order to beg for, in my opinion, but I don't really care how it happens. I would love for secure and protect to have our own database kept at the same version and wherever else, but like separate. And then, you know, we can do API calls between the two or whatever, but yeah.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Well, this may also press on a retention policy thing, because right now it's a selling point that we store all vulnerability data for forever. So there's a full audit history. I'm a little bit terrified about opening the ability for users to actually remove vulnerability records without a true rights and permissions model. This will sort of accelerate that, Fabian, to your point. If we start storing everything from all the branches and all the compares, we'll need some sort of way for users to clean up either on an automated basis or pick and choose.
Yeah, I'd want to, having run
I was thinking about self-hosted. Yeah, I was thinking about self-hosted GitLab instances.
Because we have to consider for both self-hosted and for SaaS, because we always have to consider both. But having dealt with multi-tenant e-commerce shenanigans previously in my previous life, having it be a configuration option that is executed through a scheduled job that works through a function reduces the concerns about permissioning and load, because you can have that function execute at low load times. So I think if we were to properly build in the mechanism where if you are self-hosted, you can force the function to run earlier. You know, we don't recommend it, but that's, you know, it's your install. You can choose to do that. If you're on SaaS, you basically put it in a request-ish type situation through a configuration page, and then the function will execute at the time that the function deems to be proper. which might be, you know, 24 hours or whatever. And there would be a log of that or a recording thereof.
I'm going to pick your brain on this more too, Nicole. I'm going to tag you in that other issue because people keep asking, let me delete my findings. And the impetus is always the same. I was testing out secure features. I turned on a bunch of analyzers. I didn't configure them, and I did it on an actual repo that I care about. Oh no, look at all the findings. There's so many things in here. I want to reset it to 0. It's like, well, you should have used the test project or cloned the repo.
Well, let's have that discussion because I disagree with you. Customers are going to do what customers are going to do. Let's find a way for them to unbork themselves without causing problems.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? Is that there is a script that gets run, and there's, you know, it's very, very manual, very back end.
It should be a function, and we would have to tell them, like, when you click this option, when you turn on this option, you're going to have to wait 24 or 48 hours before everything clears out. And then once it clears out, you uncheck test mode, essentially. You know, in test mode, maybe we have like a, you know, test mode keep things for a week, or test mode keep things for 24 hours or whatever. And it's like once everything clears out, then you uncheck those boxes and go back in or whatever.
That's
or
hilarious. That's exactly what I had come up with, but you only get to do that one time because I don't want people to, it's that inside actor, right? That somebody can't go in there, hit the permission, delete all the things because they had vulnerabilities and they knew it. And then, you know.
Oh, see, I think you should be able to do it as many times as you want if a maintainer signs off and approves it. Like, it should have to be like a 2-person, what do you call it? When you're launching a nuclear weapon,
Turn the keys. Yeah.
2 people have to, you know what I mean though. And
but
that's the thing.
We could keep track of what's been redacted, so to speak.
Then we don't solve our space problem.
Exactly. Anyway, okay. We're getting off topic here. Sorry.
But yeah. All right. So I will close this out, rewrite epics. I will post in the PM channel and say, Sam, would you be willing to jump on board for zeros for the next 12 months? If the plan is at 15.0 to use 6s, but with the post-processor. And if not, I'll just start planning all of my stuff with everything except for fuzzing, which would be sad, but you know, whatever.
So Nicole, we essentially closing all these issues and ethics we've created.
I wouldn't close them yet. So here's the thing.
And I'm not, just to say, I'm not complaining about that in any ways. We've learned quite a lot. That's something we're going to use in the post MVC when implementing these post analyzer stuff.
I sort of want to, like, maybe, like, if you go through one and you're like, there's nothing useful here, feel free to close it. I feel like some of them might contain enough useful data that we want to move them to the post MVC bucket, because in my opinion, in the post MVC bucket, some of the things we learned are totally, like, maybe we need to change the description of the issue because the objective's different. But if any of them have enough of a discussion that will refresh our memory about some of this stuff, I'm betting there's maybe 1 or 2 that would be worth preserving, and the rest we could.
So I think it's better than opening a new issue and linking to the old one in order to keep everything at the same place. Possibly.
If we can summarize it very clearly, then yeah, I think a new issue.
It's not too messy.
It gets crazy because some of them, like, there's like a really good back and forth that I think you almost have to travel through, but I could be wrong. But yeah, if we think we can accurately summarize taking people on that learning path, then we can close it out and like have a new issue in the post MVC that points at that. But otherwise, I feel like there might be 1 or 2 issues that I want to drag over. But yeah, we'll read through, capture any learnings, close out most of them. Maybe we keep 1 of them or 2 of them. I will summarize most of the ones we close with, you know, we want to accomplish this in a different way, you know, so closing this out.
Right.
At least we didn't start, like, you know, changing everything, get it almost released, and then change our mind.
I know. I feel like I threw sand into the gears at the very last minute on this one.
No,
but-
you are correct that until we, like, this is too small of an MVC. I know we're supposed to like have embarrassingly terrible MVCs or whatever, but this is too small of an MVC where if we start training people to ignore us, they may continue to ignore us even when we don't want them to.
I would almost call this a good MVC, but just in the wrong order. Like, I still think that what is here is going to be useful, and having something other than like did or did not pass with no any other granularity is a good objective, because then we can start putting out more rich information out of the failures. You know, the post analyzer could consume those. But yeah, I certainly appreciate the time in digging into all this and, you know, letting me poke my nose into it. So this is I think this is a great discussion. Thanks for setting this up, Nicole.
All right. Hi, folks.
Bye. Thank you.